Hey, Trailblazers, this is Jason, your host of the Trailblazing Texas Podcast. Before we jump into our latest episode, I've got some incredible news for you. Are you gearing up for your next big hike or backpacking trip? Well, we at Trailblazing Texas Podcast have partnered up with Trekker Joe's, the ultimate Texas outfitter, to bring you something I feel absolutely special. Listeners, you of the Trailblazing Texas Podcast can now get a one-time 15% off their gear purchases at Trekker Joe's. That's right. Whether you're a first-time customer at Trekker Joe's or a repeat customer like me, you can save big and hit the trails well prepared. So upon checkout, use code TTP15 to claim your 15% discount and in the process support an amazing local Texas business. So happy trails, and don't forget to tell your hiking buddies. Now on with the episode. Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas Podcast, where we embark on a journey through our diverse Texas landscapes and breathtaking trails while always engaging with our amazing Texas hiking community. So settle in, tighten up those bootlaces, and get ready for the thrilling tales awaiting for you on this episode. Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. And today, I think I said it about 5 minutes ago. I'm going to say it again. Today, I feel like I'm a kid in the candy store. I'm excited about this episode, little jittery. And the reason why, I think it's fair to say that our next guest and his company is one of the OG cottage gear companies that has helped shape ultralight backpacking way before it was cool and mainstream, and really played a vital role in really what it is today. So I'm excited to tell the listeners, coming to us all the way from California, we have the founder of Tarptent, Henry. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Joy, I'm happy to be here.
And again, I am so excited, and I know how busy you are, and I can't thank you enough. So are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, but before we do, I don't know how familiar you are with the podcast. The listeners know what's coming. This is their favorite segment of the episode, and it's on my top one or two. I have a little segment called the lightning round. These are questions that you haven't seen. They're fun, short answers, hopefully not too hard. Maybe one of them might be hard. The very last one is a controversy question. We'll see how you answer that one. So if you're ready, I'm ready. So let's just dive in.
Let's do it.
All right. Favorite hiking season?
Spring. I'm going to answer spring. By spring, I mean the transition time between kind of white and green. I love hiking in places that are just starting that transition where you can walk all day on snow or some number of hours on snow and then transition off into a green area that's just starting to kind of come alive. I love that kind of terrain.
All right. Nice. Love it. Hiking boots or trail runners?
Trail runners, 100%.
Sunrise or sunset?
Well, I would say sunset because I have a hard time getting up in the morning often. So,
yeah, me too. First thing you crave after a long backpacking trip?
Oh boy, just food in general. Probably a milkshake.
All right, I love it. Most overrated trail snack?
Trail snack. Well, I can tell you when I started that top ramen was sort of like, oh yeah, let's have top ramen for dinner. And I started out the PCT. I prepped a whole bunch of food and I threw some top ramen in there thinking, oh, that'll be good for dinner. And I instantly hated it and it all went in the trash after that.
Yeah, mine is beef jerky. I love beef jerky. Everybody you're hiking with is beef jerky, and everybody wants to give you beef jerky on trail, and I just don't want it on trail.
Yeah.
I love this question. Best environment to really test a new tent design?
So I would say that tent designs get tested in two kind of very different environments, so that they can be actually the same environment. And that would be places that are hard to pitch and places that are super windy. And they can often be the same place, but if it's super windy and hard to pitch, that's the death zone. Kind of, it's almost impossible to kind of survive in that kind of an environment. But yeah, I mean, I've had lots of. So I would say overall primarily make tents that are staked because often we use trekking poles for setup, and those are always a staked tent. And so, but I've been in lots of places where my initial site was unworkable because I just couldn't pitch the thing, but I would move a few feet and find a solution. That always works.
All right, love it. Dream hike or backpacking trip that is currently still on your bucket list?
Yeah, my bucket list gets longer every year. So I really want to, I know it's kind of past optimal because it's too crowded now probably, but I really want to go to Patagonia and see that area. And then, there's lots of all these GR routes in Europe. And there are a lot of them. I've done a couple of them, and I want to do some more of them, I think, in the GRs, all the various GRs in Europe.
Most overrated piece of gear. And maybe it could be the family of gear like backpacks or cooking stoves or...
Yeah. Overrated. That's kind of a tough one. So I mean, obviously the big three, the pack, the sleeping bag, the tent, and I guess maybe the big four, the sleeping pad. I mean, with regards to tents, I would definitely say tents are overrated in the sense that most people, I think, bring more tent than they probably need in some sense.
Yeah.
It's lighter than they need, or it's double wall and could be fine being single wall, or I don't know, it's 4-season rated and who cares? You're just trying to keep the bugs out kind of stuff. I'll just go with that answer.
All right. Love it. What is your favorite piece of gear?
That's a good question. So when I got into making my own stuff, the original thing was the original stuff. I bought a sewing machine and I started making a few little gear items for my PCT hike. A little tarp thing, just a standard tarp and some pants. I remember making a little shell jacket, and then I made, of course, the tarp tent. But the other thing I actually bought a sleeping bag. But I came home after that hike, and the first thing I actually made for myself was a down quilt because I saw some people out on the trail with a quilt, and I think that's cool because I'm kind of a hot sleeper and I don't use the zipper anyway. I just sort of unzip the thing and throw it over me anyway for most conditions. So this is kind of cool. So I made my own quilt, and I'm still using it 25 years or so.
No way.
Yeah, that's all I use. I mean, except for hardcore winter, I have another bag for serious cold, but for almost everything else, I use my quilts. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you still have it?
I still have it. Yep.
That's awesome. All right. Favorite environment to backpack in, mountains or desert?
Mountains, no question. Yeah.
All right. Sweet or savory on trail?
I'd say savory for me.
Coffee or tea on trail?
Coffee.
Freestanding or trekking pole shelter?
So the third option is an arch pole tent that doesn't necessarily freestand, I suppose. I'm not a trekking pole user. I'm a dinosaur that way. So I bring arch pole tents almost exclusively, some of which freestand and some of which don't. I mean, you still kind of have to stake them, but they're essentially held up by an arch pole.
All right. One luxury item you always bring on trail?
Well, I don't know how you define luxury exactly, but I always have my device, something either my phone or something I can use to listen to audio recordings or get a radio signal or something along those lines. I mean, I mean, to me, that feels like a luxury, but it can be a necessity, I suppose.
Mine is a camp chair and a pillow. I get so much crap for it, but I don't care.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Favorite state or national park?
Favorite state or national park? Well, I'm a little biased because I live here in California. So, I mean, I love Sequoia, Kings Canyon, parts of Yosemite. I try to go to the place, when I go to those places, I try to kind of get off the main trail. It's all kind of off trail stuff. And I find little lakes and peaks and valleys that nobody visits or almost nobody visits. It's kind of fun that way.
All right. So if you look at all the trails that you've hiked, what is one trail you think everybody should experience at least once?
All the trails, and it's a continuous trail. Okay. So the Colorado Trail in Colorado I've hiked. I actually it's very memorable for me because that's the first and hopefully only time that I ever got Giardia. And I had to,
oh no,
I think I ate some or drank some bad water coming up out of Denver, and I got about halfway into the trail and I had to quit and go home, and it was pretty nasty. But then I came back the following year and finished it up. But I love that trail for the kind of just the intense variety of scenery and ecosystems along the way. It's interesting that way. It's not nearly as sort of encompassing, I suppose, as the Pacific Crest Trail, but it's doable. I mean, if you don't have enough time to hike a really long trail, it's
Right.
doable if you have a few weeks to do the Colorado Trail. I think there's lots of small trails in and around, like the High Sierra route in California. That's really nice. It can be as technical as you want it to be if you go a little off trail. And I had a very memorable experience in Scotland, hiking across Scotland on the TGO, which is, it's hard to call it it's sorry, on the coast to coast. I also did the TGO, but the coast to coast I did with my wife, and we hiked it not because it was extremely intense, but it's a very different trail experience in the sense that you can stay in like bed and breakfasts every night or little motels, hotels, and have a nice dinner and warm up and take a hot shower and whatever. And so, and just the people along the way. And such a different experience than hiking any trail in the U.S. So
Nice.
I'll throw that on there somewhere too.
All right. So the next two questions are just yes or no. The first question, it would be like me asking someone, which of your children are your favorite? So just yes or no. Do you have a favorite tarp tent design?
Yes.
Is there one that means the most to you personally?
Yes.
That's all I needed to know. So what is the most underrated feature on a tent?
I would say usable interior volume, in the sense that everybody looks at specs and they go, well, this floor is 84 inches long, or this floor is 92 inches long. So the 92-inch long floor tent must have more length, right? Because it's 8 inches longer. That's not necessarily true. It depends what's happening at the end wall angles. And so lots of tents, if they're shallow wall angles, actually don't have as much usable volume as even an 84-inch floor. It totally depends on what's going on outside the floor, not just the floor.
Oh, man, I love that answer. Really gives you something to think about. Last question of the lightning round. This is the controversy question. If you get it wrong, it's okay. We're going to keep going. If you get it right, you're going to get 2 thumbs up, and we're still going to keep going. Best for hydration, water bottles or hydration bladders?
Bladders.
All right. Now, this is kind of probably one of my favorite parts of the episode, is really to get to know you outside of a tarp tent, your journey through hiking and backpacking. So for the listeners, nothing to do with tarp tent, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I come from a very much non-hiking family. My parents didn't hike. My grandparents didn't. I don't know of anyone else in my family that has the hiking bug like I do. But I do give every credit to my parents for when I was, I think about 11, their local church, the Episcopal Church, had a kind of a summer backpacking program. And I think basically to get rid of me for a week so they could go enjoy their life, they said, hey, why don't you go on this? So I went on it, and I hated every step of the way. I'd never carried a pack before. It was miserable. But when we got to the destination, which was a day of hiking, it was this beautiful place called Young Lakes in Yosemite Park. And I had never kind of experienced like alpine lakes and summer snowfields before. And I fell in love with the terrain, with the surroundings, with the experience of being in an alpine place. And then as the years went by, I kept going back and doing the same kind of thing, the same group. And then I went from, uh, being a young guy to an older guy. I eventually became like, a leader in that organization, and then it kind of progressed up until I finally led my own trips after a while. But that was a kind of a life-changing experience that my parents actually got me started, although there was no interest anywhere in my family to go hiking. But that changed my whole future because of that.
Nice. So going back to that very first backpacking trip, what were your emotions leading up to it as a young one?
So, I'd never worn a pack before. I didn't know what gear was. I got some help through some family friends to kind of setting me up with a pack. I remember that part. And the pack was basically bigger than I was. I was a little guy. Um, and I didn't know what to expect at all. I remember having these gigantic, like somebody said, "Oh, you need hiking boots." I remember. So my parents got me these gigantic hiking boots that were half the size of my legs. I'm clomping along with a big pack on. So, the hiking experience was miserable. I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. But, I was like literally crying on the trail getting to the lake.
Yeah. Yep. I have 4 of those. My kids, they hate hiking and backpacking with me. I guess looking back, maybe not when you first started getting into it, but, as it started to evolve in your life, did you ever imagine that some facet of backpacking would become your career?
In no way, shape, or form. Never. No, no. And I still didn't feel that way. So, the life-changing event for me, of course, was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. And, and I finished that, and I felt that I'd accomplished something and all that. But I had no intention of ever going into making my own gear or anything. That's a whole other story involving my wife, if you want to go into that. But that.
Oh, we will.
But that wasn't. No, I didn't have any inclination. I will say that I have always been interested in sort of general design and how things work, in understanding the mechanics of things. I was a physics major in college, and that part of it has always intrigued me, kind of how things are made. But I made some things along the way, and I did make sew a few things for my trip. But no, starting a company or going anywhere with it, no, definitely not.
So starting the company, I guess it was back in 1999. Let's talk about how all this began.
Yeah, it didn't really begin until the following year. So 2020 was the year that my wife borrowed my original PCT shelter that I had made plans for and published a website on how to make your own. And I called it a tarp tent because it was not really a tarp and not really a tent, somewhere in between. Anyway, I published some plans because what had happened was along my hike, I was keeping a daily journal. And I had this thing back in the day. It was very early in the kind of the tech industry. There was this kind of somewhere between a phone and a calculator sort of thing. It had a little audio speaker and microphone on the back, and a little keyboard and a tiny little screen on the front. It's called Pocket Mail, and you could type mail. It's basically an email device, but I used it to keep a daily journal. And then when I would get to a payphone along the way, I would send it home to my wife, and then she posted it to our website. And then anyway, along the way, I got a lot of people who found the site and were very interested. And eventually I was talking about my gear, and one of the things was a tarp tent and et cetera. So when I had published some plans for how to make the thing eventually, and I improved it a lot when I got home. And then I just kept getting emails from people saying, "This is kind of interesting. Are you in the business of making gear?" No, I hate sewing, but here's some plans. Have fun. That's where it would have ended. But then, as I said, in the next year, Cynthia, my wife, borrowed that tent, tarp tent shelter, and took it to hike most of the High Sierra Trail in Yosemite and so forth. And she came home complaining it was too hard to set up. I said, "What do you mean? I lived on the thing for 4 months. How hard can this be?" And all right, fine. Just to make you happier, I'll make something better, just easier to set up. And so I had no experience I had basic computer skills, but I didn't know how to design anything really. So I eventually came up with the original design, which was essentially the tarp tent shelter, except instead of having a single rear pole, I put an arch into the back of it. So instead of a front pole and a back pole, it had a front pole and an arch pole in the back. And that made the setup, it turned it into a 4-stake setup, and it definitely was easier to set up and take down. And then I went ahead and published some, I got back to some people who were interested in the original tarp tent shelter saying, "Hey, I have this other thing. If you're interested, I might see if I can get a friend of mine to make a few if you're interested in buying one, whatever." Because I wanted to make them feel like they were, if they really wanted something that really I thought was an improvement. And I had met someone on the PCT whose sister was a seamstress, kind of in her off hours. She had 4 kids, so she'd work from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. sort of thing. Anyway, long story, she agreed to make this tent for me, and I said, okay. And so I thought, well, let's just kind of formalize this. We'll create a site. We'll call it tarptent.com, and we'll put these things up there, and there might be 20 other crazy people in the world who might want such a thing, but at least it's out there. And, and I remember the first day so Tarptent.com launched on tax day in 2002.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. And then I remember the first day we had like 30 orders, which was insane. I thought that would be twice the global demand for such a thing. And I had no way to make that many that quickly to satisfy order. So it was a long process of me cutting pieces and parts and sending them to my friend's sister in New Hampshire, and then she making the tents. And anyway, that went on for a while until we found manufacturing in Seattle. But that was another year plus before that happened.
So when you originally designed your first shelter, what problems were you trying to solve?
Well, the big problem for me was, I'm pretty sure my first shelter was just a basic tarp. Anyone with a flat tarp, that by that I mean a straight seam. So basically an A-frame, kind of just a single straight seam, 2 joined pieces of fabric, or even one piece of fabric folded in half, will realize that gravity pulls down on your structure, so you will get inevitable sagging through the middle of the tent. So the solution to that is called the catenary curve. And I knew something about catenary curves, but it hadn't entered my mind that I should put one into my tent until I started building this new and improved tent that became our first commercial product. And I was playing around with designs, but I didn't have any way to really do this well using CAD, computer-aided design software, because I had never used it and didn't know how to use it. So my first attempt was really kind of, I designed the thing with the arch and the arch pull in the back, and then the kind of the single front pull. And I was literally laying fabric over this skeletal structure and kind of pinching and pulling it in various places to kind of get a pattern that kind of worked, because I knew what I was trying to solve, but I didn't have any mathematical way to do it. So that was very early on before. And then subsequent to that first tent, which I called the Virga, I did delve in and learn CAD, and then that completely changed things. And then every tent subsequent to that was all designed on CAD.
What was the point in the early days where you were like, this is going to turn into something?
Well, that's a good question. So,
I mean, the 30 orders probably scared you, but then,
Yeah, I found a way to kind of get the tents out to people who were ordering them eventually. For some people, it took months and months and months, but I kind of worked out that system. I was in the middle of a career change then. I was studying to be a teacher. I went to the Stanford School of Education, and I was going to become a physics teacher formally. And I was in my spring about to graduate from the program. Somehow, some way, Backpacker Magazine had found Tarptent.com and somebody had gotten hold of one of their products. I don't remember that they ever ordered one. No one said backpacker on the order form or whatever. But anyway, and they published 2 articles in that. I remember that spring of 2004, Backpacker Magazine, 2 articles about tarp tent products. At that point, there were 2 of them, and then all of a sudden, our sales, doubled overnight. And I was right in the middle of making this serious career change move, and so for a while, for about a year, I did both. So I was trying to kind of fill orders and handle all the production of stuff and be a teacher. And I got to the point where I realized I couldn't do both things well. There was no way. So I thought, well, I'm just going to see where this business thing goes. And when it fails, and it will soon enough, then I'll just go back and be a teacher, because that's what I'm trained to do. At whatever, 2 years later, I'm still doing this. But when I retire, I very much want to go back and be at least a tutor somewhere, help out.
So tarp tent over the years has remained relatively small. Was that always, or is always, the intention?
So one of the decisions I made early on was to not go the retail route. So we have always been a direct to consumer company, and that was very much a choice that I made early on and have wanted to keep going. It's not quite true anymore. I mean, we have some distributors now, but that's a small percentage of our sales. And as a product designer over all these years, I firmly believe that leads to better products in the long run, because your end user the person that's using your customer is your end user. Whereas in the retail world, your customer is the store that you sell it to. And then what they do with the product is totally up to them. You're disconnected from your end user. So I like having, with some exceptions, of course, I like having conversations, communications with the people who are using our products. And I've taken a lot of feedback and advice to heart over the years, and it's led definitely to new product development and product improvement.
Absolutely. So what are some of the biggest challenges you find kind of keeping it small in this space?
Well, I mean, the data that that it's true for every company, I'm sure, but it's always about trying to align, supply and demand. And so for a long time, we made everything in Seattle, a factory up there, and we were constant. They were just running, full time making stuff for us, and they could just keep up with demand. And then in the late teens, there was this little startup in Seattle called Amazon.com, and they started hiring everything that moved. And it really decimated a lot of local businesses in Seattle, including our sewing facility. And so we had no choice but to go find other manufacturing, which we were able to do, but change the essential nature of what we were doing, which is that we were just sort of, building and selling constantly with the Seattle company. When you change to a big, manufacturer, especially in other countries, you're submitting purchase orders. And there's a many month delay between the time that you submit an order and by the time that you get a finished product. And then you get into the whole world of figuring out what is your expected demand going to be many months down the road. And then how does it change if the product production is finished up late, then what happens? You're left with inventory. And so the whole kind of inventory kind of ebb and flow demand has changed dramatically for us since those days. And so it's a whole different kind of problem to solve to try and match things up when there's this inherent many month disparity between ordering and getting the product that you can then sell.
So looking back, what is that biggest business lesson that you wish you'd have known from the very beginning?
Well, so all companies go through this. So there's always the human resource thing. There's always the finding people to do what you need done, and then trying to figure out if they're the right person, and then how to deal with it when they aren't the right person. So there's always that. And I had never had to go through that before. And there were definitely some mistakes along the way. And then the other thing I think is we got, especially when we had to go into this kind of purchase order many month delay thing, is the financial situation changed pretty dramatically. So we needed a lot more capital to play that game than we played when we were just turning the wheel with our Seattle factory. And so we were never out very much money because they're constantly making stuff, and we would just buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell. But when you buy, wait, and then sell, it's a much bigger financial disparity. So, we had to engage in a lot more loans and all that stuff to kind of pay for that whole process.
When I was preparing for this episode, looking at the website, and I knew of Tarptent, I knew of your tents, but I didn't realize the amount of designs that you have. And what I found was cool is they're all relatively different from each other. Like, I started thinking about myself, like if I was designing something and I had something to work, I would just copy that and then maybe add a zipper here or something. But just thinking like the thought that had to go into this, what problems were you trying to solve with this design and stuff? So kind of not to share any secrets, but, maybe at a very high level, what is that process that you go through for designing a new tent?
So historically, I would say over all these years, a lot of it has not really been a plan so much as I said earlier, taking feedback from customers, listening to what it is that they want, what changes they want, what's sort of missing. And a lot of it's just been, so I've come up with a number of sort of kind of basic design elements that then I've kind of reassembled or reconnected in various ways. So like, for example, something that we now call the pitch lock, which is two little carbon fiber tubes which flare out into an inverted triangle sort of display. And it's very stable, and it's a way to lift the ends of the tents and then provide a very stable endpoint, which is then staked with one line coming off the corner there. So that pitch lock thing, which is architecturally, that's the right word, a way to add a lot of stability and a lot of interior volume to a tent, can then be combined with other things called trekking poles or arch poles into all kinds of different variations. So a number of our tents use the pitch lock, but then also combine that with an arch pole or arch poles or trekking poles to produce all kinds of different designs. So I like to think in terms of, I think all tents are what I call skins and skeletons. So the skin being all kinds of different fabrics that you use. We can go into all of that. And then the skeleton being the thing that holds up the tent. So a little side story is when I first started, as I said, I'm not a trekking pole user, and it never occurred to me, frankly, that you would use a trekking pole to support your tent. And when we put out our first design, which is called the Virga, which was my attempt to satisfy my wife's dissatisfaction with my first tent. It had the little arch pole at the back and a little vertical front pole at the front. And we shipped the tent, of course, with the arch pole and its own little dedicated front vertical pole to hold up the tent. And I would get, feedback from people saying, "Hey, the tent's great. It works. It does what I needed to do. But I just replaced your pole with my trekking pole." And I just like, "Oh, duh." I mean, it had never occurred to me. So that's very much a customer contribution to so many of our tents now, is the idea of using trekking poles to hold up it just hadn't occurred to me. But yeah, so, and then, arch poles can be used in all kinds of different ways. And there's all kinds of different, you can do single arch poles and double arch poles and all these kind of different ways to join the two and then marry them up with other structures. So I don't know. I think over time, the skeletals have just been for me, it's about how do I maximize the interior usable volume of a tent? That's important. How do I add a lot of stability to the tent? And then of course, ultimately, weight matters, of course. And so if you can kind of get all that done with a single arch pole, that to me is generally better than using two arch poles, for example. It's half the pole weight. So I don't know.
Speaking of that, how much time do you spend thinking about weight versus durability when you're designing something?
For me, it's always been a lot more about, historically anyway, it's been a lot more about utility and durability than weight. But I will say that in recent years, weight has become much more of a concern and much more of a competitive, not pay point, but it's been much more of a competitive bar that you're trying to hit relative to competitors. So you're competing against other people that, especially to the kind of the less educated maybe consumer, that it looks like, yeah, the tent does the same thing, but this tent's 4 ounces lighter than your tent. I'm just going to pick the one that's 4 ounces lighter, without really understanding. Well, yeah, but it's a trade-off. It's everything is always a trade-off. And so if I lost 4 ounces on this tent, what else have I lost besides just the weight, kind of thing? So for me, it's always been more about the utility and the design of the thing. Weight's been much less of a concern. My general thinking is it's all kind of a percentage game in the sense that it depends on your overall pack weight. So if your overall pack weight is whatever pounds, some fraction of that is your tent, and then some fractional difference of that is the difference between one tent and another, or one gear item and another. And can you even notice the difference? And the fact that you're drinking in a quart of water all the time, that's 2 pounds right there. And so anyway, your pack weight fluctuates, and relative to your total pack weight, a few ounces is immeasurable, unnoticeable. Right. So whatever. But it's certainly, it's a big part of the market now, is getting as light as possible. And we've gone that route in recent years with all our Dyneema tents, certainly.
All right. So you have a design, you AutoCAD it, you put it together. How do you know the design is finished?
So obviously we make samples of everything, of course. We test them out. We get them out there in the rain and the wind and whatever. And one thing I'll say, again, back to this thing about usable volume. So I would say that a tent that was finished a few years back is no longer finished, in the sense that it doesn't correspond now to other changes in the gear industry. And notice it, and notably, it's what's happened with pads over time. So pads, when I started this business, the typical pad was just a thin little, inch or two maybe thick pad, often closed cell foam. 20 inches wide by 72 inches long. And that was kind of your basic pad, right? And so that then defines, and so a human body is on a thin little pad and a not very wide pad. And so you're building your structure around the body on a pad. But now what's happened is been this tremendous push in the industry to get thicker, longer, wider pads. And so now the human body's getting pushed up in the air and it's spreading out all over the place. And now that a tent that used to work prior with a thinner, smaller, thinner pad no longer works, frankly, because now you're running into the tent walls.
Oh, man.
So, and it's not like anybody ever sends out a memo. The pad company doesn't send out, hey, tent companies, by the way, we're going to double the size of our pad. Just want to let you know.
We're going to sell the heck out of them.
That doesn't happen. Yeah. So, yeah. And of course, the bigger, thicker, wider pads are heavier than they used to be. And so then now the pressure's on us to make lighter tents to, make up the difference. Anyway, so it's a whole part of the industry that I've learned this along the way, but it never crossed my mind that I'd have to worry about pads exploding over time in size.
I never thought about the impact.
Yeah.
How stuff like that has on you guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So like typically, a standard, so for example, a standard kind of 2-person tent, not that many years ago, just needed to be 40 inches wide, right? That's 2 standard width pads. But that no longer works because most people are now using wide pads. So now your floor width has to go from 40 inches to at least 50 inches.
Yeah.
And frankly, some of these pads are now pushing out in 30 inches wide. So now pretty soon we're going to get the call, hey, I need a 60-inch wide tent to fit my 2 pads.
And it's got to be less weight.
Yeah.
So I love this question. Have you ever created a shelter that you thought would be a huge success and it wasn't?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's happened. It's hard to know. So there's definitely more and more competition all over the place in the tent world. And so the things that you're always up against are the overall weight of the product, single wall and double wall, and then pack size. Pack size is the other thing we haven't really talked about, but pack size was something I never really worried too much about early on. That's another trend in the pack industry is that packs have gotten narrower and taller. So you might have the same volume pack, whatever it is, 65 liters or whatever number you want. It's the same volume, but it's a whole different shape. So now it's really skinny and really tall, whereas it used to be wider and not as tall. And so a tent that used to fit horizontally in a tent, which is the preference for most people, I think. They want to put their tent in horizontally, although technically you don't need to. But anyway, if you want to put it in horizontally, it no longer fits in my spanking new skinny pack, right? So now I need a new tent because my pack no longer will contain my old tent. So that's another kind of pressure point on us is to come up with tents that pack smaller and smaller. So that requires us to do things like downscale the size of the struts and downscale the size of the folded arch poles, or do away with both things altogether.
So on the flip side, has there ever been a design that surprised you or how well it became?
Well, I mean, I'll go all the way back to what is still kind of our best-selling product overall is the rainbow design or double rainbow design. So it's a very simple tent. It's just a single arch pole over the middle and a little cross strut across the top. And then the thing that we added to it was the ability to set it up freestanding with trekking poles at the base. That's part of our patent for that tent. Is the adding the trekking poles to kind of give it to take the place of 4 corner stakes to hold the thing up to keep it falling over. And that's a very kind of simple design. It does what it needs to do pretty well. And but at the time I had no idea what the sales would be on it. But it's still doing as a design, and it's expanded into a number of different iterations now. 1-person, 2-person, 3-person. Single wall, double wall, all kinds of different fabric varieties, whatever. That's kind of that's our biggest seller overall. And that never occurred to me that it would be back in the day.
When you have a design, how much real world testing goes into the new shelter? And before you answer, if you ever need a tester,
you're the guy.
I'm your guy. I have hurricanes here.
Cool.
I go to the Guads. That's my heaven on earth, Guadalupe Mountain National Park. We're having 60, 50, 80 mile an hour winds. So
So well, between me and other people in the office, we definitely test everything before we send it out. It's hard to put a metric on it exactly. We do try and take it into winds, at least in the Sierra, our closest mountains, and again, definitely get it snowed on, get it rained on, and all that. So, many of our designs these days are just sort of variations on other ones, and so we have a pretty good sense overall that if we make a small change to something about what the effect would be on wind rain performance. So I would say honestly, we don't need to do a ton of testing on stuff that are just variations, like this double rainbow design, for example, that I mentioned to you. We keep putting out different versions that are single wall and double wall, but essentially they do the same thing in the wind. So we have a very good sense of what they are. We don't need to seriously test those because we know what they do. The only testing thing that's does need to be tested, I would say, is these laminate fabrics, so Dyneema and Ultra TNT, and now some very much thinner fabrics, all the way down to right. We've just put out some tents that are 15D, which is new for us, and those, without a doubt, will rip more easily than a 30D fabric if it's the same thread material. So we have to be much more aware of and design into it we have to be much more aware about where the stress points are on the tent. So we'll go and there are days when we're out here in the backyard just kind of pushing on the tents and simulating what would happen if the dog jumped into it or whatever, and just kicking the lines and just kind of trying to break it kind of in right here on the lawn to get a sense of what happens out in the world, that's what happens. So there's the natural forces, but there's the human forces too that break tents.
So do you get the guys together whenever there's like harsh weather coming? Hey, we have a tornado. Let's go.
We don't have tornadoes here, but cool that you do.
So what's the harshest weather you personally experienced in one of your shelters?
I have I've definitely been in kind of full on Sierra blizzards, serious snow, high winds. Probably the biggest storm I've been in outside the US was when I walked across Scotland, something called the TGO Challenge. This was back in 2010. I took a tent we made back then called the Moment, which we still make now. We make a double wall version of it, but it's a single arch pole through the middle with two pitch lock ends. And I remember camping up on for Scotland, quite a high mountain up around 4,000 feet, and getting just whacked by the wind, and just hoping and praying that the thing wasn't going to crack, and it didn't, and I was quite happy with it. But that was like that was that for me. That probably that evening was the most on edge I've ever been in a tent. I remember thinking if this thing dies, I'm in trouble here because I'm a long way from a town.
So, you have a perspective over 2 decades of the backpacking industry. And maybe we've already talked about it, but what have you seen be the biggest change in the industry?
Well, so when we started, kind of the cottage gear kind of guys that we all kind of started small gear companies, and the whole idea of sort of trying to get really light, kind of use really light materials was pretty much outside the mainstream, certainly gear industry. So if you were, whatever brand you want to name, we're generally using much heavier fabrics and pulls, and so that was kind of and over time, all of the bigger gear companies now have all kind of joined the party to kind of get lighter. And so because that's really become kind of much more the norm now, is just trying to be light. It's no longer. You're just not going to sell as many, 7-pound tents as you will for a 3-pound tent, for example.
So outside of the sleeping pad companies don't talk to the tent companies, or the backpacking don't talk to the tent companies, are there any other trends that concern you?
Well, back to this point we just talked about for, trying to get lighter and lighter. So, everything's a trade-off. And if you're going to get really light, you will be giving up longevity. You will be giving up potentially fabric strength and performance, and so it's a trade-off. And so for example, in the laminate world, the Dyneema world, which is the lightest fabrics out there these days, It's sort of a dirty little secret that Dyneema just doesn't have the longevity of a coated nylon or polyester. And for people using big Dyneema fans, people doing through hikes or whatever, they're out there for roughly 4 months, and in their mind is this is my this is my big event, and if I just need my gear to last for this event, and it generally will. A Dyneema tent will last 120 nights or more and be fine. It'll start to wear out a bit as you get on, and it'll start to develop little holes which you can patch and whatever. But you're very unlikely to get like 2 through hikes out of a Dyneema tent. It'll really start to develop holes and stress points. And whereas a coated fabric, it's entirely, especially a heavier denier like a 30D or above, it's entirely feasible. We've seen tents come back from 3 full through hikes that are 30D nylon, and they're still kicking. I mean, they're beat up, but they're still kicking.
Jeez.
So kind of it's sort of the mindset of use it and then throw it away. I think that's definitely kind of the current market mindset for a lot of people. The other thing that's happening is, especially in the retail world, I've noticed is you have to understand your market. So your market for a lot of people doing backpacking or glorified camping is that they're out there, they're using their vacation time. So, a few weekends here and there, or their week or two vacation every year. And so they're only using a tent for a few nights a year. And so, 5 years down the road, well, now you're up at, maybe 50 nights or whatever, and your tent's starting to show some wear and tear. And then the mindset is, well, geez, I've had the thing for 5 years. I guess it's just time to get another tent. And it's sort of it's a spreadsheet game with a lot of these big box gear companies, big box tent companies, who are getting ridiculously thin fabrics now to get the weight down, but they just don't have any kind of serious lifespan. But they're playing off the mindset of the customer, which is that it's been years since I bought the last one. I guess it's just worn out. And they're not counting up the number of nights it's been used and realizing, hey, this wasn't a whole lot of nights, was it?
Yeah, for the investment.
But they've sold, but the company has sold a tent, and the few replacements that they need to do along the way for people who are using it more than a few nights a year, it's worth it because they've sold enough now it's a spreadsheet game. So anyway, that I see as a trend is it's the getting lighter and lighter and saying, oh, this is great because it's lighter, but then definitely downplaying the fact that it's not as durable as it was.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very, very interesting. I love that. So COVID, social media has brought a lot of new people to the backpacking world.
Yep.
How do you think it's changed the community?
Yeah, it's a good question. So COVID definitely changed. There was a massive explosion in demand, well, for our tents, but I'm sure for a ton of other people in the post, especially the sort of the first full year past the initial COVID year. So what was it? Would that have been 21, 22, kind of in that range?
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who were like, yeah, I can't go to work or whatever. I have this time off. I'm not going to go live in a hotel. I'll go camping. It's cheap and it's whatever. So there was a huge gear push, and then there was a lot of investment made in manufacturing, and then the market, I won't say crashed, but it died way back, and then a lot of people got stuck with extra stock, and so there were a lot of sales going on to try and sell off the excess. And I think we're now back pretty much to the point where the supply and demand is evened out a bit, but there was a definite imbalance there for a few years. But I think in general, I mean, it's hard to say. I think I'm sure it's true that a lot of people did experience outdoor life who hadn't before because of COVID. Whether that turns into, the long-term passion, life events, life planning, it's hard to say. I don't know.
I think that it's brought in a lot of people that didn't grow up in the outdoors, that never learned to respect the outdoors.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of irresponsibility I see going on. You can get into leave no trace principles, or social media glorifies this trail, that it's really nothing, but you're in the back country in West Texas and you don't realize there's no water and you should be carrying tons of water and you think everything's going to be hunky-dory and you catch yourself. We have people die every year. Big Bend, Guadalupe Mountains, Palo Duro, just because of heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And it has to be because they look at all these reels and these influencers and it's, oh, look at me. I could do this. And and I guess to no fault of their own, they don't really understand kind of what they're getting into, or, they think, oh, it's a trail. If something happens, I just turn around. But, sometimes you're not able to turn around anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good, a fair evaluation. I'm sure that's true. I mean, I would say that kind of, definitely, I'm sure it's true in all industries, but as a manufacturer, you're always trying, you're appealing to your customer, but you're at the same time, you're educating them. I do a lot of what I think is education with people, trying to help guide them toward what I think is the best tent for their intended use, and trying to say, I don't recommend this because it's too fragile for your use, or it's too small or too big, or whatever. I try to help them think through the process of getting what I think is the best gear for their intended use. But yeah, I mean, lack of experience and lack of knowledge and carelessness, for sure, I'm sure it's out there without a doubt.
Yeah. So on a positive note, what is one thing you hope never changes about our backpacking and hiking community?
To your point, I think it's the appreciation of wild places, and that. So, I mean, for me, being in a wild place, it's unlike anything else could ever be, but then to appreciate the gift in that moment and realize that this didn't just happen. I mean, a lot of people worked hard and invested a lot of money, frankly, in making this opportunity available. And I will say it's sad to see all of the cutbacks to all of our public lands. I won't go into politics too deeply here, but it definitely, it one way or the other, it will affect the wilderness experience opportunities for people going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I'm in the Guads, I'm 10 hours away. I go a couple times a year. I've been there, I think, 27 times. You could tell me right now, Tarptent, Jason, is going to pay for your next 100 adventures, and it would be 99 of them would be at the Guads and maybe one Cap Rock. I love that place. There's not a time that I've visited the Guads that I don't cry. Whether she's broke me because it's just tough out there, whether I've got thorns through my shoes, into my toes, into my knees, or I'm just leaving, and I always stop about 10 miles out, and we have a rock face called El Capitan. It looks a lot like the California El Capitan, and I get about 10 miles away, pull off the side of the road, get in the back of my car, and I just look at her, and I tear up because, is this the last time that I'm ever going to, 'cause you don't know what life has in store for you. But yeah, man, I totally get what you're saying. So agreed. So I love this question, and it's going to be awesome to get your opinion because of all your knowledge. What separates a great shelter from a good shelter?
It's a very good question. I think, so a lot of it, well, I just want to say this up front. There's no such thing as a perfect tent. I think there are tents that are definitely much better suited to certain people in certain conditions than others. Like a basic kind of single wall tent that keeps the bugs out is perfect for some conditions, and it's terrible for other conditions. And, whereas some basically mountaineering tent saves your life in certain conditions, and it's way overkill for other conditions. And so I think for me, it's always been about, certainly my preference is kind of the minimal thing that'll get the job done without causing me suffering. And I mean, I appreciate the luxury on some tents, but I always, if I've gone out there with a tent that's, so I've gone out there with tents that are sort of, I'm expecting bad weather, and for whatever reason, it doesn't happen. And I'm laying there going, God, I wish I had just not brought this tent because it's just too much. I didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that attitude, certainly. I mean, a tent is, it's your house, in a different environment or whatever. I mean, the idea behind your house is it keeps the rain and the bugs out and keeps you warm enough that you don't die during the night. And that's kind of what your tent needs to do, is it needs to get you to the next morning, with minimal pain and suffering, or, maximal pleasure, of course. But when I look at a tent, to me, it's about, does this thing kind of do what I want it to do for my particular need? And that's kind of my decision point, I think.
So, we were talking about lightweight, how the trend is going now. And, and as you said, the lighter you go, there's trade-offs. How do you decide where those trade-offs belong?
Yeah. So I think, for me personally, I mean, one of the reasons why I for years and years and years, I resisted the trend or the interest in Dyneema was the cost, which is, it's literally 4 or 5 times the cost of a coated material. And, to me, it wasn't worth the trade-off. And then we just got so much interested in it. I said, okay, fine, you win. We'll make some. But I think, I mean, I'm not comfortable with tents that I know right off the bat aren't going to survive for very long without suffering damage in some way. And like, the other dirty little secret about Dyneema, I'll just say this, is that, so it's a laminate fabric, and the Dyneema brand is really about the fiber. So the thin fibers, it's laid out in vertical lines and horizontal lines. It's a grid. And then what gets with the waterproofness is the mylar layers. The mylar layers are relatively weak, but they're very waterproof until they aren't. The fibers are very strong. That's kind of what ultimately you're buying the strength of the fabric, but the problem with it is the fibers can only resist stresses right parallel to the grid line. So as long as you're pulling on the fabric along the grid lines, horizontally or vertically, the fabric is very stable. But when you pull on in an off angle direction, so basically your force lines are diagonally through the grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fibers have no way to resist that kind of stress, and so you get this elongation, this puckering in the fabric. So what you'll see with Dyneema tents over time, especially if they're not designed very well, is you'll get a tent where they go, oh yeah, you can just add an extra guy line to the mid panel and pull it out. Is you'll get this permanent puckering in the fabric, and it'll never again be the flat fabric plane that it's supposed to be. And so, that's one of the things that it's, when we design Dyneema tents, and I've had a lot of conversations with customers about this, is we would never recommend putting a mid panel pull out in a Dyneema tent, because you'll permanently deform it the first time you use it. So it's just sort of understanding the weaknesses, the strengths and weaknesses of fabrics, and then trying to design around that, as well as the other things about interior volume and wind performance and all that stuff.
Whoa. And who knew all this went into designing a tent?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say there's someone listening to the podcast that maybe they're buying their very first backpacking tent. What advice would you give them?
Well, so I always ask people, what's your intended use? What kind of conditions do you go into? Are you a trekking pole user? How tall are you? To kind of get a sense of kind of what kind of volume do you need, and then what kind of strength of tent do you need, or are you in cold conditions? Do you seriously need a double wall tent with solid fabric walls, or you'll freeze? And some people are very warm sleepers, and some people are very cold sleepers, and so that changes what they need for a tent. So I try to get a sense of their needs and their intended use, and then find the model that best kind of checks those boxes, essentially, is kind of how I go with people.
So Tarptent helped define what we now call the cottage gear industry. Did you ever imagine it would grow into what it is today?
No, I had no idea. No idea at all. I have very fond memories. So early on, so my connection since I started the company, it's always been the Pacific Crest Trail. It's my backyard, and I just knew a lot of fellow hikers, and I got very involved in the Pacific Crest Trail Association. Anyway, we would have, for a number of years, we'd have this kind of annual get together in April down at the Mexican border, near the Mexican border, just a day's walk in. It was this kind of gathering, Pacific Crest Trail gathering at the beginning of the trail. And it was a way for all of kind of the cottage gear people to kind of get together. We would see each other every year and just, have fun together, laugh, and go check out each other's stuff and ask questions. And we would often go on trips together before or after that, the gathering and stuff. And it was really nice. It was very, it's just kind of an innocent part of my career. You know what I mean? It was before we all worried about all the competitors and all the changes to the industry, and we were just around. It was being around good people, kind of doing good things. I have fond memories of those years. That's all gone away now, and that unfortunately the founder of that passed away a number of years ago, and it's now moved up to the Columbia River Gorge outside of Portland, and it's now kind of. It's very different. It's, people, if you happen to be there because you're just there at that time of year on the trail, then you could go otherwise. But by that time, the trail crowd is so spread out that it's a very small group of hikers who actually make it this thing. It's just much more kind of retail oriented, and it's a whole different vibe, and I don't really enjoy that. So I've been a few times, but.
So why do you think our backpacking community is so passionate about supporting cottage brands?
Yeah, I don't know.
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
I think.
I'd love to hear your answer.
As we talked about before the podcast, I never had when I started this podcast, it was just to give me an outlet. It's just a hobby. I don't monetize it. But having Trail Brush on and Trucker Joe's and Marion Outdoors and Hilltop Packs, Kula Claws, Anastasia, and you, I get to see your face when you answer these questions. I get to hear the stories about you're hiring people in the small little towns. You're taking on all this risk for us, right? Like, you're not doing this because you want to be a bazillionaire.
No.
You're doing this because you care. And I think for the majority of us, hikers and backpackers, we're good people. No matter what political beliefs you have, what religion, whatever, you're good people.
Yeah.
You can sit around a campfire and who cares about all that crap? And you can get along and you can care about each other and you help each other. And I think that's it. Like that, again, we talked about this. My goal for this is that when in asking you to come on, I want to do my best to sell you out. I want my listeners to get to know you, to see what you go through, because it cannot be just because you're trying to make a whole lot of money. It's because you care about us and you want our experience and adventure to be, no gear fails and just flawless. And yeah, I think we see that. And I think it's our way as a community to give back.
Okay. I mean, you're right in the sense that, I mentioned this kind of my fond memories of the early PCT kind of hiker crowd and getting together with other fellow gear makers. That to me was kind of, that was the core of my experience as a hiker before I became a gear maker. It was kind of getting together with people who were just launching and kind of feeling the excitement, but also the uncertainty of, God, what's ahead of me? I don't know, but I'm gonna try. Kind of attitude.
No. So, what excites you most about today's generation of small gear makers?
I'm always looking around to see kind of what people are doing. I definitely live in my own little world of gear design, and I try very hard not to copy other tents. I'm not interested in a tent if it's just kind of a do-over of somebody else's design so much. I mean, we've done a couple of those, but it doesn't thrill me as a designer. But I think it's, if it's a problem that gets solved that wasn't solved before, that's really cool. I mean, I love the problem solving stuff. And I've seen some tents that have, like I said, I mean, a tent is a tent. It just needs to stand up and not fall down and keeps the rain and the bugs off of you. So there's only so much you can do, but there are definitely different ways to do it. And to the extent that you can, do it in a more to me, if you can do it in a more structurally sound way, or in a way that reduces the footprint, or, like I said, increases the interior volume without a lot of other downsides or whatever, again, it's all a trade-off. But yeah, I'm just, I have my own thought patterns and my own ways of doing things, but I appreciate that other people have come up with other solutions that are good. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for Tarptent besides another 25 years?
I don't know. Well, so in the last probably 6 years now. So prior to 6 years ago, it was just me exclusively doing all the designs. And then in the last 6 years or so, I now have a design engineer working with me. It's been fun. We both appreciate problem solving, and it's fun to kind of see people arrive at a different solution to the same problem. And then we have our little kind of which one's better? Well, I don't know. Let's try this. Let's test this. Whatever. And been a fun interaction. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as you see, we have a lot of models, and one of the challenges for us, I think, frankly, is going to be to find a way to make it, because I definitely get a lot of comments, some comments anyway, from people saying, your website's great, but I'm confused. There's too many tents. I don't know which one to pick. I can appreciate that, because it's overwhelming. So one of our challenges is going to be to find a way to kind of pare it down a little bit, or combine some models into a new model that do the same thing as the other two, but in one way, not in two different ways. If you follow me.
Yep.
And so I think it's going to be finding a way to kind of pare down, or just make our product line maybe easier to understand for people. And then we're always looking at new fabrics, new materials. I mean, I think there's still a lot of growth to be found in. I'm waiting for I'm waiting for the next stage to like the Dyneema world, like some new fabric that is incredibly light, incredibly strong, and doesn't have the downsides to Dyneema. Doesn't permanently deform under stress, that kind of stuff. So I think there's always room there for new materials. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I have. Well, one of the frustrations I've had in recent years is I haven't had as much time to design as I would want to. So I want to try to figure out a way to find more time to maybe start designing a few more things. So, yeah.
Nice. So is there any backpacking problems related to tents that you still want to solve?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a problem to solve, but there have been many attempts made over the years to kind of make gear that kind of does two things. Like it's both a rain, a poncho, and a tent kind of thing, or it's a pack and a chair, or it's whatever. It's some combination of things. If you just tweaked it a little bit, it could do two things at once, kind of stuff.
No.
So I have some ideas for one particular item that I'm working on, that I have a couple puzzles I need to solve, but I have an idea I want to try to get on the market at some.
Oh, nice. So looking back over the last 23, 25 years, what are you most proud of?
Well, I guess I'm proud of the fact that we're still going. I had no idea that it would go this long. I thought I'd be out of business a long time ago. No, I feel like you can't see it on your screen, of course, but I have this beautiful photo on it's my desktop. In fact, maybe I'll send it to you as the photo. So this is what I see on my screen every day. It's a picture of the Dolomites in Italy, and there's no structures anywhere, and you're up on this high kind of meadowy plain area, and you're looking across the valley to this beautiful set of peaks in the background, and the only thing that you see is one of our tents called the Eon, and it's taken by someone who likes our products, and he was out backpacking, and he found this gorgeous spot, and he set it up, and he took a picture. And I mean, not only is it's a beautiful picture, but in some sense, it's me there, because I designed this tent, and so my thought process, or whatever, my mental state is somehow in this picture, because that's my tent, and then my tent is looking out and seeing this other stuff in the floor. I'll send you the picture, but I love that picture, and I look at it every day, and it's part of my. When you ask what I'm proud of, I think I'm proud of the fact that I have had a part in so many experiences over so many years, that one way or the other, people have used our tents, have enjoyed their life, enjoyed their experience, and the tent is part of that experience. So,
that's actually the next question is, if you look at all the people that use Tarptent, whether it's their first overnight trip or they've been using them on a through hike, all the memories that go along with that, they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. Really, like I can't imagine how that would impact you and what that means to you, that you yourself and your team have had such a positive impact on so many
Yeah.
because of your
Yeah.
design and your
Yeah.
ideas and also your willingness to risk. It's got to be just probably one of the most amazing feelings, pat yourself on the back type things that you can experience in life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I often I'm too busy to really think about that, but I there are moments when I do kind of go, yeah, it's cool that so many people have had a good life experience because of stuff that I do.
Uh, This kind of leads to the next question. What legacy do you hope Tarptent leaves behind?
Um, well, part of it is. I mean, I don't know how explicit it is, and I don't know how many people will get it, but the fact that I was for my own hike, I couldn't find what I wanted, so I made it myself. I mean, I think that's it. I think a lot of people do that one way or the other. They can't quite find what they want, so they even hack something up and make it work better for their own needs. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to just make it work. If you don't have the thing that works for you, then make it work one way or the other. Do what you
Yeah.
need to do to kind of invent it one way or the other. And I think people who are through hikers are, for the most part, people who kind of need to do that. I mean, you don't get through a through hike without kind of a lot of mental toughness and a lot of like, I got to make this work and I got to find a way to make it happen, and I'll do it.
I really hate to say this, but as we start to kind of wrap up, because I literally think I could talk to you all day, but I know I can't take up all your time. But the last 3 or 4 questions, if listeners remember one thing about Tarp Tent after listening to today's conversation, what would you want it to be?
Well, that we're we're real people. Everyone in this company loves backpacking, spends their free time doing it, and as you said, we're not doing this to get rich, but I think we're doing it because we have a passion for the product and for uh for the outdoor experience. And we feel, well, we including me feel really lucky to be able to do this, to make a viable life out of doing this kind of thing. I mean, I would never have predicted this before I started this whole venture, you know.
No, no. All right. One of the most important questions, where can my listeners learn more about Tarp Tent?
Well, of course, there's tarptent.com. We have a few social media things. There's a YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook. Um, and then, contact me whenever you want. Henry at tarptent.com. I always answer emails or give us a call, whatever. Yeah.
All right. So this is my favorite question of the podcast, and it's my favorite question, especially when I have cottage brands on. I've learned over time, I don't tear up anymore. The first couple is a little bit rough because, as I said, I get to know you guys. I see your facial expressions. I see how much you care. Before the podcast, I'm hearing about problems that, you're providing vocation in the local communities, and I really get vested. And so, this question, if you ever listen to the episode I had with Anastasia at Kula Cloth, I'm crying like a baby, but I just love this question. And I feel that it's important to me. So I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to be strong. Henry, if you could take a step back from this Tarp Tent journey, what is one message that you would like to give to everybody who's believed in you and supported you along the way?
Well, I want to give my deepest thanks, frankly, to my wife, Cynthia, my partner. We haven't talked about her, but I wouldn't be talking to you or really anyone else in this industry were it not for her. Um, she is a PhD biologist, and she gave up her career, frankly, to come work on this one. And I um, Yeah, we would not exist as a company without her. She doesn't have the kind of the passion for hiking that I do. In fact, I got to tell you this quick. Well, it's another story. Anyway,
No, we got all the time you want.
well, we hike at different paces, and so when we hiked across, when we did the coast to coast route across northern England all those years ago, we I just my body just doesn't walk slowly. It just has to move. I can't walk at a slow pace. So I would walk ahead and then wait for her. She'd catch up, and then rinse and repeat for most of the day. And we would then meet up, and of course near the end of the day, and go find a nice place to stay for the night. And there were other hikers on the trail course, and we met this one pair of hikers who had been following us all day long, and then we ended up at the same little kind of bed and breakfast place. And they said, "Yeah, we were watching all day long, and we thought maybe your way of doing things that the woman was always behind, and so we thought that's what was going on." Like, no, I just walked too fast for her. But but really, I mean, yeah, she's sort of the the hidden part of Tarptent that this would not exist without her.
Wonderful. I love it. So to the listeners, I have a little bit of a story. So I know you heard, hopefully you listened to Cameron and myself's
Mhm.
through hike of the Lone Star Hiking Trail, the longest trail in Texas. And I asked Cameron in the lightning round what was his favorite backpacking brand, and he said Tarptent. And not on the podcast, but in other avenues, because I talked to him a lot. I asked him what made Tarptent his favorite backpacking brand, cottage brand, gear company. And he said when he first got into backpacking, and he's got a wonderful YouTube channel, Cameron Hall. It's wonderful. I don't remember how long it's been. It's been a while. It's probably been 10 years old, his channel, but he bought a tarp tent, and he doesn't remember what the issue was, or he had a question, or whatever the situation was. But Henry, you called him. He sent an email in, and you personally called him and walked through whatever it was. And he's never forgot that. It meant a lot to him. And from Cameron, he just wanted to say thank you,
Yeah,
and thank you
good.
for caring about the community as much
Good.
as you do,
Good.
because that'll never happen. Probably most companies where the head dude is calling you personally and working stuff out. So from Cameron, he thanks you, and it really had a lasting impression on him that you would take the time to give him a call. So
Oh, good. Well, he's welcome to call again, or I'll call him.
oh, yep. Absolutely. All right, Henry. Well, that is it. I definitely can't thank you enough. Again, I'm still giddy. This was one of those episodes. I don't know what episode this will be, but Thursday I'll drop like 127. So this will probably be in the 130s. I'll definitely let you know when it drops. But man, this has been everything I hoped it would have been, and I was just hoping that I wouldn't screw it up.
You passed.
I passed. Yes, sir. All right. Well, again, I can't thank you enough, and I will do my best to support Tarp Tent and hopefully sell you out.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's been really a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, I have one question before we go. I need a tent recommendation, a tarp tent recommendation. So I'm looking for a tent that can withstand desert and desert island or environment. So desert, everything that entails, but also up at elevation, you're in forest, but you still have the stickery stuff that you try to stay away from. Winds in the 30s, 40s, up to probably 80 miles an hour. Hopefully, we're hunkered down when that happens, but it does happen. And also, I'm always in the quads in the wintertime, so it could be blizzards, snowstorms, ice, everything you can imagine. What tarp tent would you recommend for me?
So I think what I'm hearing is possible 4-season conditions. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then, so are you talking? You're thinking blowing dust, blowing sand,
Everything.
potentially. Okay. So for blowing, so what happens with all tents with low level mesh is this, the sand dust blows in through the mesh. So to counter that, you kind of need solid fabric sidewalls. So I would probably recommend. So one of our newer products, which frankly is not a new design in the sense that it's just a dome tent, but it's a strong tent and it has solid fabric sidewalls. But would be the Arc Dome 1. That's a 4-season tent. You could take a look at that. And the other one you could take a look at might be this. Again, this is for one, right?
Well, I always get a 2-person tent.
Oh, a 2-person tent. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, there's the Arc Dome 2 then as well.
Okay.
So in our current, well, I was going to well, for trekking pole use, you are a trekking pole user?
Well, I do use trekking pole, but in the quads, I would rather have a freestanding because of the environment.
All right, I would just point you to the Arc Dome 2. See,
that's what I have on my screen.
Okay.
I did some research and go, yeah, that's what I think I'd pick. All right, well, I thank you for that. And again, Henry, this has been a blast. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I can't wait to get this episode out to the listeners. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you, sir. You too.
All right. Bye. And that wraps up another exciting episode of the Trailblazing Texas Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and stay tuned for our next episode where we will pick back up where we left off and guarantee to uncover many more hiking gems and share many more tips to enhance your experience on the trail. Until then, happy trails and happy hiking.